Welcome to the Friday Night Reading Series. This is part of the MFA in Writing and Publishing's programming here at VCFA. The MFA in Writing and Publishing is a multi-genre creative writing program. We center poetry, fiction, nonfiction, playwriting, and screenwriting in our program, as well as publishing. So our students get to take classes with editors and agents and other kind of leaders within the publishing industry. We are VCFA's only residential program. The remaining programs are low res, and as you may know, our program will be merging and closing at the end of this year. It'll be merging with the low res program. So this is our kind of final victory lap and year of celebration for this program. We're really excited to honor our faculty, our visiting writers, our graduate students, and our alums this year. And we're very excited about this evening's programming. We have a number of illustrious guests. We have Jasmin Darznik, who's joining us from California. She'll be introduced by Hassan, one of our graduate students. Bianca Stone, joining us from Vermont. She'll be introduced by Xinyi Pai. Koon Woon, who I used to work with in Seattle when I was a graduate student in the MFA program. He's also going to be introduced by Xinyi Pai, and I'm so excited to have you join us from Seattle today, Koon Woon. And Jenny Wortman, who's a writing we've been reading and loving in my forms class. She's joining us from Colorado, and she'll be introduced by Xinyi Pai. In terms of the format of this evening, we will have introductions followed by readings from each of our visiting authors. And then at the tail end of our readings, we will do a Q&A with the audience. So if you're an audience member, feel free to jump in with a question or discussion point at that point. Shini will be moderating the second half of this evening's programming. And just a couple quick announcements. This program will be recorded. So if you do not want to have your video recorded for any reason, feel free to mute it. I ask everyone who is not speaking at the microphone to mute their audio as well, so that doesn't get picked up in the recording. And then at the end of the program, I'll make just a couple of announcements about other events that are happening on campus for the remainder of the semester. One is that there will be a meet and greet with one of our visiting writers, Sean Wong, on Thursday, December 10th from 3:30 to 4:30 Eastern time. So if you'd like to participate in that, let us know. You can email Shinyi or me. And we recommend the graduate students and faculty check that out. Jasmin Darznik will be doing a lunch with our graduate students on Friday, December 11th from 1 to 2 o'clock Eastern time. So please do check that out. And then on Friday, December 18th from 12 to 1 o'clock, Koon Woon will be doing a meet and greet with our students in Erin Stalcup's class, Publishing and Fieldwork. So, so please do check that out. Oh, Jasmin, is your lunch from 12 to 1 o'clock? It might be that time. So anyway, do check our programming on our Google Calendar for more information. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Hassan, who is going to be introducing Jasmin Darznik, our first reader of this evening. So take it away, Hassan.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So today we have Jasmin Darznik is the New York Times bestselling author of the upcoming novel coming out in April of next year, The Bohemians, a novel that imagines the friendship between photographer Dorothea Lange and her Chinese-American assistant in the 1920s San Francisco. Her debut novel, Song of a Captive Bird, was a New York Times Book Reviews editor choice and the Los Angeles Times bestseller. Darznik is also the author of The Good Daughter, a memoir of my mother's hidden life. Her books have been published in 17 countries, and her essays have appeared in the New York Times, Washington Post, and Los Angeles Times, among others. She has been featured in numerous academic journals, newspapers, and popular media, including National Public Radio, The Today Show, New York Times, Newsweek, and The Atlantic. And she is the owner of a beautiful author's website that I highly recommend checking out, on which she mentions that she is seeking out lost or forgotten tales and about women in history and bringing them to life. Without further ado, let's welcome our author.
Thank you so much, Hassan. Hassan, I was all of that was fantastic, but the part about my website was really wonderful because I made it myself. So I just I just feel so proud right now.
It's a beautiful website.
Thank you so much. Um, Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for Rita for the invitation. Rita and I met many years ago, and how wonderful that we're connecting here today. I promised I was very lucky when I asked what I could read. I was told I could read anything, and I thought, well, why not read something new? And I've been reading from Song of a Captive Bird for a long time, and I thought, you know what, this is a good time. This is going to be a nice gathering, a nice place to launch. So I'm going to read from The Bohemians. That's the novel coming out in April, and just as you heard, it's biographical fiction about the photographer Dorothea Lange. The first and most important thing that happened to me when I got to San Francisco was that I learned what it felt like to be alone and penniless, to have no tie to the world but fear, hunger, and need. That's where it all started for me. I set out in the spring of 1918. I was nearly 23, eager and restless, with just bobbed hair. I had all sorts of ideas of who and how and where I wanted to be. I'd scrimped for 2 years to save the $142 folded inside my wallet. 2 years of hand-sewn dresses, borrowed books, lunch pails of leftover mackerel and canned beans on stale black bread, but I had done it. I'd seen my last East Coast winter. Nothing could hold me there any longer. I sailed from New Jersey in a steamer, traveled 5 days down to New Orleans in a third-class berth, then another 12 days across the country by train. I'd been saving up to go to Paris, but with the war on, there was no chance of that. My plan now was to spend a few weeks in San Francisco, then head south to Mexico. The details fell off from there, but I figured I'd just keep going until my money ran out, and when there was no farther I could go, I'd work out what came next. I carried my camera in a case that hung to my hips. There'd been little else to keep and even less I cared to hold on to. On my lap sat a battered leather valise I'd picked up in a thrift shop before leaving home. It held a half dozen rolls of fresh film, a pencil and a sketchbook, a few days' change of clothes, a toiletry kit, and a second-hand copy of Edna St. Vincent Millay's Renaissance. The train was crowded and noisy. The food was terrible and cost too much. For days, I was tired and hungry. My body was stiff from trying to sleep upright in my seat, and my bad leg had cramped up. But the moment the conductor lurched through the car calling, "Oakland Station, next stop Oakland Station," I sprang to my feet, belted my coat, and gathered my valise. Someone propped up a window and a breeze rushed through the cabin. There was a great deal of shuffling and maneuvering around me. People were crowding on one side of the train, craning their necks to catch sight of something outside. At first, I couldn't make out a thing, but then I edged my way closer to the window, stepped up onto my toes, and the bay emerged, splendid and sparkling, the low angle of the sun catching it and setting it aglow. When I squinted hard, I could make out steamer tugs and fishing boats, and beyond that, a city skyline clinging to the edge of the earth, struck gold by the afternoon sun. San Francisco, the jewel city, Paris of the West, a place where everything, absolutely anything could happen and probably was happening at this very moment. A place you could disappear into if you dared. Here it was. Here I was. I'd grown up close to the water, not far from the Hoboken shipyards, but nothing prepared me for that first glimpse of San Francisco in May 1918. Until that moment, I didn't know that everything around a city, sky, land, sea, could make it look so small. But even if San Francisco seemed smaller than I'd pictured, it was still a thing of beauty and wonder, what with the bay and the deep green hills encircling it. Also, it wasn't just beautiful. It was foreign to me in a way that Manhattan had once been and wasn't anymore. No one here knew me, which meant I could be whoever I wanted to be. When the view disappeared behind the factories and behind rows of clapboard houses, I cracked open my camera case and admired my camera, its sleek metal shine, its perfect polished lens. My mentor had given it to me a few months after I'd started working for him. It was my first camera and by far the best gift anyone had ever given to me. "You have an eye, Dorothea," he told me. It always made me smile, remembering that day. Genta's eyes dancing as he held the camera out to me, the moment when I took it in my hands, felt its exquisite weight, and understood that it was mine. The train jerked and tilted and stopped. I made my way down an aisle and onto the platform, half carried by the crowd. I hurried along as fast as I could, as fast as my limp let me. Soon I was in the streets, heading toward the docks with my bag thumping against my thigh, my heart slamming against my chest. I had on a split skirt that ended at my ankles, a tan Macintosh cinched tightly at my waist, and high buttoned black boots. The boots could have used a shine, but I was bent on catching the very next ferry out to San Francisco, so that would have to wait for now. The whole business was over so fast. 1 minute the ferry was rocking softly, easing into the terminal, and the next minute it bumped hard against the piles, jostling the passengers and knocking us into one another. I stumbled and nearly fell, but then a hand grabbed my waist, its hold warm and firm. "Careful there, miss," came a voice from behind me. I twisted around. The man standing there was handsome and beautifully dressed with a three-piece suit and a checkered bow tie, blue eyes and blonde hair, slick with brilliantine. I felt myself staring. It was rare to see young men nowadays, particularly young men out of uniform. Somehow the war hadn't claimed him or hadn't claimed him yet. It took me a minute, but I came back to myself, straightening up and lifting my chin. When I thanked him, the man winked and gave me the richest smile in all the world. Well, hello, California, I thought, and felt my cheeks go warm. Once we disembarked, there was no sign of that young man, but it hardly mattered, not with all the plans ticking through my head. Then, a few steps from the ferry building, I happened on a bakery. Through the window, I saw a stack of donuts under a glass dome. My stomach gave a twist. The last real meal I'd eaten had been somewhere in Texas. It was only some minutes later, when I'd ordered 2 donuts and a cup of coffee, that I reached into my pocket and discovered that my wallet has disappeared. I reached inside the other pocket, the one where I always kept my watch, but it too was empty. For one wild, dumbstruck moment, I stood completely still, heart kicking against my chest, and then it came to me in a slow seep of understanding. That handsome man, beautifully dressed on the ferry, was a thief. As one of the genuine miracles of my life, I still had my camera, but as for my money, it was all, every dollar of it, gone. I think I might stop there. I don't know. I think I'm just at about my time and I don't want to overstay my welcome. But that's a true story. It's true that Dorothea Lange set out, she wanted to go around the world. She was bent on seeing the world. She didn't have much money. She saved up for so long. And the day she got to San Francisco, all of her money was stolen from her and she had to make her way without it. So it was a a great experience writing the book, getting to be in San Francisco in the 20s. I grew up around here, but writing about a place really acquaints you with it, and so it was a glorious time writing the book, and I hope you'll read it when it comes out in April.
Thank you so much for that preview of your book, Jasmine. Our next reader tonight is Bianca Stone, who is a poet and visual artist. Bianca's books include Someone Else's Wedding Vows, poetry comics from the Book of Hours, and the Mobius Strip Club of Grief. Her poems, poetry comics, and nonfiction have appeared in a variety of magazines, including Poetry, Jivalat, The New Yorker, and Georgia Review. She lives in Vermont and is a visiting faculty member for the MFA Writing and Publishing program. Please welcome Bianca.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. It's so good to be here. Okay. I'm going to read all poems from my new book. This one's called You Could Spend Every Night with the Television. Because I know that's what you're doing. The uneasiness of being alive wears you down. So you might sit with the television, your obligatory interview, fatal in its mirrored posture, one musical interlude after another, all the universes of Star Trek you haven't mastered, the unreal digitally rendered areas of planet Earth you will never enter. You sit down with it like a detective who knows way less than she's letting on, sits across from the cantankerous, yet somehow absurdly fearless criminal. You'll be there all night bluffing one another. You could spend a lifetime eating dried fruit and nuts and wine like an apostle, resentful of the flock and its huge vision, and not even fight the urge to be given a better story with all its core crew immortality and moral surrender. You'll accept it. You'll sit down as a kind of equal in its light, like a painting that faces a window, two things requiring witness. You will cancel each other out. This poem's called Not the Last Television Poem. Because my editor said I had so many she was sad that this was the last television poem I'd write. But there'll be more. Whose is that noble, dauntless brow? Television, you great time waster, a miracle, 1,000 flapping frames of miracles piling up on one another. I'm vanishing altogether inside a myth of perpetual nemesis, two implacable forces clinging to distinctiveness, and we are the tiny old gods subscribing in a spasm of terror. Sorry. This is just so funny because I'm just sitting here alone in my kitchen and it's like I'm just reading. It looks like I'm just reading poems to myself. It's awesome. I mean, I do that anyway, but it definitely does not look weird in this household. This poem is called Wolves. Well, where are you? Virginia Woolf would begin her letters to Vita Saxville West. Or here's another selfish invalid's bulletin, which is how I feel staring at a black and white photograph of an Arctic wolf. Though it is not the greatest of compositions, too much is faded, unclear. It arrests every part of me. The bare, depressing winter trees against the bloomed gray-white sky suit me. The wolf's footpads in the snow disappear into haggard whiteness. From a removed, righteous vantage point as viewer, I realize we are meant to be the photographer. And I assume the wolf is female because she looks right at me from her confine of light and chemicals on paper. Some part of her soul burned on there like a nuclear shadow. And that is how women look when seen suddenly from the wilds of their private, difficult life. One second. Tragic nature. Your 3-year-old has found you sitting in the kitchen. You can hardly speak when you are like this. She pauses asks why you are sad, climbs onto the counter and begins siphoning something into the corner of your mouth with a plastic play syringe. Lemonade, it turns out. The sugar enters you like naloxone. She is the one alive holding up. Now the huge cowbird, your illness, a ravenous changeling in the sparrow nest stirs uneasily. You, the sow who eats her piglets because she is tired of the whole succession of things, grubbing in their invincible soft skins, glass eyes, fresh breath. It is hard for mothers to be like this. It is hard for mothers to be sick like this. Across the field, frogs have climbed out from the pond onto Route 7 in an evening rainstorm. The pavement steams. The frog silhouettes fling left and right like a child's wall decal into the evening traffic. Long stream of bright twin spotlights. Their lives are brief. The road the next day is littered with them, the smashed, twisted bodies of young frogs. I'm just gonna end with this poem called The Way Things Were Up Until Now. I am bored of all the excuses, bored as Mayakovsky at the Finnish painters exhibition, barking like a dog through the prime minister's toast until he cried and sat down. Deadly serious. I'm bored as an elegy. I mean, why care at all, speaking as a pitfall in a world of pits, but we do, to the death. We all agree to garden this year. In my raspberry bushes picked over by wrens, I'll make them great again and let America go wild. It'll be all trumpets and leeks and lilacs from here on out. Let's stop paying for it. Let's get it for free. Let's plan our victory gardens to supplement grief and boost morale, like something new and uncontrollable or available. It is the original hot future joy, and we're making it out of dough. And the illusion of separateness, let it go back into remission. Just look at you. You look like a resurrected child, a serious drama and a cosmic joke, scarred, masked, dangerous. And what of the new Eucharist? How hungry I always am, how I long to lack. Though in Walmart, my heart beats a little faster. I want the world to heal up. The world is a field, as if it were indeed flat, curving and caving, as if it were a piece of paper, a Gustave Doré engraving from the Divine Comedy, the one with the silhouettes of Dante and Beatrice standing in front of the blinding, exploding white rose that you realize when looking more closely at is all made up of bodies and wings twisting together. The saintly throng, they call it, mashed and hurtling, an image of heaven and the creation of angels, though it is frenzied as any image of hell around a blinding divine nipple, Odin's lost eye in the well, the drain to the other side, joy that gets more frantic the more you try to quiet it down. Thank you again, BCFA.
Thank you for those stunning poems. They're really lovely. Our next reader tonight is Koon Woon. Born in a village near Canton, China, Koon Woon immigrated to Washington State in 1960. He earned his BA from Antioch University, Seattle, and studied at Fort Hays State University. Koon is the author of the poetry collection Rice Bowls, Water Chasing Water, which is a winner of the 2014 American Book Award from the Before Columbus Foundation, and The Truth in Rented Rooms, which was winner of a Josephine Miles Award from Penn, Oakland. His poetry has appeared in Premonitions, a Kaya anthology of new Asian North American poetry, among others. Koon also published a memoir, Paper Sun Poet, When Rails Were Young. Koon is the publisher of Goldfish Press and the literary magazine Chrysanthemum, and he lives and works in Seattle, Washington. Welcome, Koon.
Hi, Koon, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you. This is the smallest book I have. It's published by Longhouse Publishers. So being a small book, the poems would be very small too. So anyway, I want to just read one, being the season that we are in now, nearing winter. This is called Bare to Green. Bare is the season, twig by brittle twig, updraft and downdraft, rain followed by sleet. Hot tea in my room, Frigidaire kicks over, hums. No, it is electricity, borrow from Susie. T.S. Eliot for measure, Rod McEwen for laughs. In Twee ice cream, in E. Kling's Big Olaf. So long I'm insulated from the world in insults, I can play this lonely game until the twigs bud green. So we started out with a very small poem, and the next one would be a pretty big one. So it's called The Universe Asserts Itself Over Time. It is not the random bang that begin the whole thing, said the universe, certainly not inadvertent noise. Well, I have produced the Milky Way, Earth, girls and boys, who implicitly follow my expansion in all its rules. The notion that infinity can collapse itself as a third-class thermodynamic machine is absurd. It was postulated by Feynman Einstein's. The time's rhythm varies according to how space curves. Like in Sean Fallan's lingo, how long a taxidermist looks at a songbird be mounted depends on how shape reminds him of his mistress. Lest you and I go for infinite tenure in a black hole, unless I digress. You might as well get used to it while you're in it yourself. And I'm going to be here for a long, long time. I am, after all, the totality of all thinkable things. If something is unthinkable, thinkers that can live outside the universe. Actually, it's your definition of me that makes me infinite in time, space, and thought. But you have forgotten what a such is. And so I, the universe, forever expand, more entertaining than the ever-widening gyra of circus clowns, and epistemologically meaningful as well. But you know, said the universe, you can be significant too in limited ways. You can send a spaceship to XJ 2137 and come back and land near the 7-Eleven. Or you can annihilate a few galaxies and subsume to Earth views, or collect all random literary quarks bouncing in cosmic space and hand them over to Judge Borg to meet our sentence of infinite length. This is my legacy to you, spoke kindly the universe. And remember, it emphasized, no other island exists outside this one, no mine except yours. This one is about my father when he was buried. It's called the Ushers Tie. Our unpleasantness seated on the warm colors of sofas of Butterworth Funeral Home. The important and appropriate gesture wore a tie. You remember the evergreen blackberries we picked from Mama's jam hang on the side of the railroad track? Some were so ripe they dropped when we breathed. Haig didn't respond. He was thinking, 3 kings don't beat a flush. 2 younger brothers held up Mama's column of grief supporting her arms. The last rites later will be one in Christian and one in Chinese, in which will burn a hell of a lot of hell-big notes, a choice between heavens. It will, in a stone 3 times the size of his grandfather's, we have arrived. We're burying him at Lakeview Cemetery, the same burial ground as the martial artist Bruce Lee. Now firm again as the spring rain let up. Here on will be Hamlet. I can only talk to his ghost. He tells me the same story. Railroad, restaurant, and laundry. Immigrants who thought of returning but never did. There's so much beef and duck fat, they stayed. But I will tell his story. He stood half his life in front of a wall, while Sonny listed and he lasted 3 rounds with Cassius Clay on the kitchen radio. My father was not thinking of chop suey, but his juk sing children, another invention in America. And in his village in China, the red ripe berries would fall. And one did yesterday. Then something else would grow in its place. As we here lower them down, something new will rise up. The juk sing means American-born Chinese, the bamboo nature, which means heart and abuse-resistant outside, but empty and hollow inside. So this one is a motto after Seixas Vallejo, a Peruvian poet. It's the dead will consider and reconsider. While living, consider the struggles of spiders. As in a high tower, one overlooks common soot, that in a dungeon, one watches the works of spiders. The living with lice in armpits won't deny it, while the dead cling ice and glasses of silver, liking it. In carved palaces of ice, bird tongues amuse exquisite ears, while lost in the woods of ancient mountains, one listens to the axe. The dead will consider and reconsider. Straitjackets and verbs and nouns, even semantically sound, but the more dead and the very dead will consider and reconsider. Marketing everything for coins in their eyes, the dead and the very dead will make delay while still possible. The dead consider and reconsider. After due consideration, they say, we need more sugar and donuts. Make yourself complex and contradictory. Make yourself mean. Consider the needs of our publishing machines. The living go on living, like dandelions pushing through the cracks of sidewalks. But the dead and the very dead keep considering and reconsidering. When the smoke settles in passageways, I've got to go. And this one is kind of a prose poem. It's too long, I skip it. And this one is called In My Little Room. We just had an election, so this is in my little room. I talked to the emperor how we can fix the election. So that's what happened. So, in my little room, the emperor removes his robe, and we chat about the mechanics of winning an election. I saw, and I conquered, says. When the moon comes out above the dilapidated warehouse, he asked me the profanity going to the moon and back again to the same ghetto room. If it pleases your majesty, I say, the gods make the ghettos. I am king, says the emperor. I shall have no gods. And then he shakes, nearly spilling his oolong tea. With his calm down enough, I drop 2 lumps of sugar into his cup. He marvels in my calculus book in integration theory in digital watch. Had I one of those, he says, I would have time my crossing the Rubicon at 18. And what barbarian woman would not have given herself for that? He yawns imperially over my utensils, books, and card, and asks me to cross the Rubicon with him. And I nod while doing tax equations for His Majesty because the hour is late. He's delighted with the hot chocolate on a hot plate. And after making a rough estimate of the roaches on the wall, he sleeps on my cot as any sovereign would. I rattle my typewriter like a machine gun all night, partly because it's my habit, and partly to protect my friend the emperor. For though he has crossed the Rubicon with the bravest men, he has yet to sleep a single night in the ghetto. Okay, moving on to Chinatown, more and more grim poems. This one, let the Chinese mafia sleep tonight. Let them sleep and dream the dream mobsters. I am likewise at peace in my little cottage, trying to become Mr. Five Willows. I figure in a crab apple is useful to no one but itself. But my safety depends on having no place where death can enter, not acting on every rustling of the smallest branch. My abode is at the bank of the river, a river that comes from the marsh where the river merchant's wife has pined for a departed husband for the last 300 years. Beetles fight on the dung heap, and that's the essence of war. With axes and arrows, a superior force approaches my door. Let them knock lightly so not to disturb the bird in the cage, which I'm coaxing to sing, while the can learns to my the midnight lore, whose pretext drives me to the brink of insanity. Let them all sleep and dream that the god of war has brought them riches in the shape of gold nuggets, only to find in the morning an empty store. You can be my dream if I can be yours. In any case, let the Chinese mafia sleep tonight so I can be at peace, and in the morning open wide my door. Okay, this one is not really me, it's a persona poem. It's called A Business Proposal. You are the owner of this business? We have good news for you today, sir. We can increase business revenue this very day. In some ways, you can say we're consultants. We advise, serve, and protect. Why, even the police say that. We do something similar for you. By being a new and select customer, today we can offer you a special rate, and only for you, sir. We'll monitor your business, and it satisfies a thorough background check. You have never had a bankruptcy, nor any other kind of financial complications, and that's why we think you'll be a good client. The terms are simple. Your business will improve 100% as of tomorrow. We'll print new menus and offer home delivery, a source of new revenue, and your profit will be 40%. It ain't too shabby, is it? And you don't need to do anything. Leave the bookkeeping to us. The only thing different is we'll print out the proceeds each day, and don't worry about the paperwork. We're veterans of this kind of business. Only one thing, mister, if you mess with our accounting or blab, remember that the tongue that flaps in the wind ends up in the soup, and we'll cut off your little finger. That's not me, okay? This is a syllabic poem. Each line has 10 syllables. It's called Sometimes. I have lived in a lot of rooming houses when I was going to college, so this is a flashback to that. Sometimes rooming house quarrels over the table, where Joe leans his old bicycle, and Frank is about to eat his mushrooms. Sometimes loud voices out in the hall. A thin plywood door is a mere pretense. Noise creeps into the parlor of my room. Sometimes quaint things grown in isolation compensate with loud exotic features. Both admire and fear like a fancy tune. Sometimes raw internal voices drive us across the ridiculous to the abyss of Nietzsche in Wagnerian heights for doom. Sometimes when the sheriff comes to inquire about my thoughts, I exhibit recent math results calculated in my room. Sometimes he smiles big, custodially, and say, jail's not where you want to be. Don't be a fool and write critical verse, or set off surplus crackers that go boom. Okay, I think my time's about over now, is it? I read one poem from memories. This is my first ever published poem, Goldfish. The goldfish in my bowl turns into a carp each night, swimming in circles in the day, regal, admired by emperors. But each night while asleep, it turns into silver, a dagger cold and sharp, couched in a spot and not frightened cats. The rest of the furniture squats in the cold and dark, complains being a low man's furnishings, and plots a revolt. I can hear myself snore, but not the infidelity. Sometimes I wake with a start. Silently, they move back to their places. I have been unpopular with myself, pacing in my small square room. But my uncle said, even in a palace, you can but sleep in one room. With this, I become humble as a simple preacher, saying, I have no power to emanate from God. And with this, I sleep soundly, fish or no fish, dagger or no dagger. When I wake, fish is gold. It pleases me with a trail of bubbles. My furniture has been loyal all night, waiting to provide me comfort. Yes, there was no conspiracy against a poor man. And with this, I consider myself king. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Koon. Our last reader of the night is going to be Jennifer Wortman, who is a 2020 National Endowment for the Arts Fellow and the author of the story collection, This is Love, Love, Love. Her work appears in Tri-Quarterly, Glimmer Train, Hayden's Ferry Review, Diagram, Normal School, Best Small Fictions, and elsewhere. She lives with her family in Colorado, where she serves as Associate Fiction Editor for Colorado Review and teaches at Lighthouse Writers Workshop. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you. Thank you, Rita, for having me here. And thank you to everyone at VCFA. This has been a wonderful experience from beginning to almost end. I've been going back and forth about what to read tonight. So I decided to split the difference. Should I read something old, something new? I'm going to read something fairly old from my book. This is Love, Love, Love. Just the first few pages of the opening story called Love You Bye, and then I'll read a very short, newer story. Okay, so Love You Bye. Oh, and I should mention that this story jumps around a bit, sort of braided, so I will just pause and you will then know I'm shifting between sections. All right, Love You Bye. My psychic friend sees light cords extending between people and their phones. But, she says, unlike the glowing metaphysical threads of relationship that stretch between two sentient beings, these cords don't attach at both sides. They end abruptly at the phone, terminating in a right angle that slips frantically against the chem-armored plastic. This dynamic, she contends, explains our depression epidemic, the great unrequited love in late capitalism between people and their things. An unattached light cord, like a chest of drawers moved alone, weighs down its carrier, is almost impossible to bear. I think of this as I, a longtime depressive, stand in line in a glaring white store at a cacophonous mall to purchase my first smartphone. It's 2016, and I'm so behind that I no longer take pride in my small, pointless gesture against technocracy, all the more pointless because of my addiction to every other screen in my life. In 2016, I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. My psychic friend's powers are useless to her. So she tells me as I sit on the floor of her studio apartment, gazing up at her as she perches on the edge of her unmade bed with her latest complaints. She's been down lately. Has she lost weight? I ask if she's eaten. She's not hungry, she says. Maybe a small snack? Dry Cheerios? She looks at me funny. I'll eat later. But I know where these complaints, this appetite loss can lead, from my own days of dry Cheerios. At a crisis hotline operator's bidding, I crawled to my kitchen to retrieve them, doing my best as I moved to sustain the feeling of hiding in bed. I say crawled, but really I lurched, launching forward then resting on the gritty floor, all the while keeping the phone to my ear for coaching from my new best friend. That phone had a cord that I stretched, but not far. My apartment then was small, shrinking by the day. My turn at the new phone counter, a black snake in the middle of the room. My heart thumps triply hard, stirred by the triple threat of a business transaction with a stranger in a shopping mall. The phone boy, like all the phone boys, is young, wily, and thin, a touch of cool in his short hair, his company logo polo, white as the walls, strapped into his business cash pants. I wave my prehistoric phone at him, a practical unnecessity, but a spiritual must. He is my confessor, and my phone is my confession. Forgive me, I don't belong in this world. Most people, bemoans my friend, don't want to hear about their light cords. Much worse than them are the people who do. They want to know everything: color, texture, intensity, diameter, circumference, penumbra, odor, taste. They want to know more. They call in the middle of the night, asking questions she can't answer. She knows light cords, and that's all. A light cord can express something about a relationship in its present form. It doesn't tell the future or explain the past. Although the past and future might be inferred from the condition of the light cord, and is in fact almost always obvious and predictable. The obviousness and predictability come from the tedium of human behavior rather than the cords themselves. And the word almost is key. Sometimes my friend's inferences are wrong. When she was young, she preferred to advise rather than predict. But those who craved her advice most, those late night callers with insatiable needs, were the least likely to take it. So now she neither advises nor predicts, except for the occasional grim prediction about others to me. She agrees to go for a walk, a good sign. We pass a couple whose light cord is bright black, dim purple, dried blood brown, the tendrils knotted and thick, some plunged into the woman's chest, some wound around her neck. Abusive relationships, my friend tells me, have the strongest cords. That woman will never leave him. But sometimes they do, I say. Sometimes they leave. You have no idea, says my friend. You don't see what I see. The odds are infinitesimal. But it could happen, I say. By your own admission, you never know. She stares at me, her dark eyes darkening. I'm her longtime depressive friend. Why am I on the side of hope? It could happen, she says, but it won't. Unsurprisingly, the phone boy laughs at my phone. Or maybe he's just laughing at me, at my overreactive face, which I'm sure now conveys an excess of shame and fear. But it's a kind laugh, and I fall for him a bit. Then he says, yeah, I don't want to join this century either, but you got to do what you got to do, right? Right. I sigh, adding extra wind and a shoulder collapse for his benefit. He laughs again, and I smile. He's one of those clean-cut blondes with electric blue eyes I don't consider my type until they aim those eyes at me. Things turn serious. We talk phones. We talk plans, radiating confidence and concern. He gives me choices, explains pros and cons. He helps me find the best phone and plan for me. By the time I leave the store, I am in love, and I will stop there. Thank you. And now I'm going to read a story called A Person's Essence Feels the Smallest. First, I will take a sip of liquid. All right. A person's essence feels the smallest. We're sitting in the driveway after a nice night. Italian meal, not cheap wine, easy talk. I figure I might as well introduce him to Mom, who's watching the kids, because he'll probably be around for a while. If she finds fault with him, so what? She's already found fault with him. She said something must be wrong with him if she hasn't met him yet. And I said, maybe you haven't met him yet because something's wrong with you. Ha ha ha. And then she said, ha ha ha, but really, why haven't I met him? And I said, 2 months is still new and I want to keep things light. And she said, I've known you since before you were born and you don't want to keep anything light. You want to swim in darkness. And I said, where did you get that idea? And she said, from everything you do and don't do and say and don't say. And I said that when I said I want to keep things light, I meant not heavy, not dark. I don't want not dark, but I also don't want dark. I tell her, I want an intense gray. And that's what I think I have now with this man, and I want to show my mom. I take a deep breath, I guess I'm nervous, and start to invite him in, but he takes his own deep breath and says how I sound and what I say are two different things, just like most of the songs on Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA. He says this causes tension, artistic tension in Bruce Springsteen's songs, but psychological tension for him when I do it, as well as interpersonal tension for us. The thing is, I don't know what he's talking about. I just say things the way I say them. But he insists that my loving words sound mean and my mean words sound sweet. He says it's like your eyes say no, but your mouth says no and yes. Then he says, I'm not talking about no to sex. Saying no to sex is your God-given right. I'm just talking about the ways the sound of your voice or sense of your words says no to me, my essence. A person's essence, he says, feels the smallest no more than it feels the biggest yes, because the person's essence itself is a yes and the no is a foreign object. And I'd given him spiritual tetanus with my sound sense discrepancy. He should probably break up with me, he says, before the spiritual tetanus gets worse. But then again, he had mixed feelings about Born in the USA when it came out. And now, decades later, he understands its full brilliance and beauty. So maybe one day he'll understand my full brilliance and beauty, and I'll be like his now all-time favorite Springsteen album, except we'll have sex, but only when I want to. I've only had sex with him when I've wanted to, right? And I say right because it's true. I really, really wanted to. And he says, you're doing it again. And I say, doing what? And he says, oh my God, I don't think I can put up with this. And because I don't know what else to say and don't understand what he's saying, I say, okay. And then he screams, okay, okay, okay. In the way he thinks I said it, and the way he thinks I said it is girlish and mocking, or maybe he's just mocking my girlishness, even though I'm not a girl, I'm a woman. But what do I know? I mean, seriously, what do I know? I know just enough to leave the car crying, and when I get inside, my mom says, oh no, what did he do? But her eyes say, oh yes, and I'm swimming in darkness. And then I stop swimming, I go down in, and I say from the darkness, what's wrong with me? And she says, nothing, baby, not a damn thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. We can all take ourselves off of mute for a second if we want to and just applaud.
Thank you.
So we'd love to move into question and answer for perhaps the next 20 or 30 minutes. If you have any questions for any of our four presenters, feel free to unmute yourself or to put them in the chat if you prefer. And I'd love to get us kicked off with a question for Bianca. So Bianca, I know you're a visual artist from your website, and that's a part of your work that is hard to present in a reading like this, but I know that you're doing some work in the genre of poetry comics, and I know a bit about graphic novelists working with memoir or with the journalism form, and would love it to hear you talk a little bit more about what perhaps this poetry comics genre is, who are practitioners, how you got into it, and if you could just talk a little bit about what this sort of particular practices that you have, and what are poetry comics.
Yeah, it's a really fun question, and I've been doing a lot of writing lately about what poetry comics are, and getting really deep into it, because I don't think it's quite an easy answer, but I think in general, for me anyway, but like in general, like I am a poet first and foremost, but I also have always loved drawing and painting, and I found a way to sort of integrate the poetry and the art together as sort of like a genre that I think of as poetry, but it's definitely like it's like a subgenre of poetry. And so a combination of my poetry and my art. I pretty much sometimes I'll collaborate with people. Like I collaborated with Anne Carson early on in my career, and I've collaborated with other artists on books that combine text and image. But mainly I do these sort of pen and ink and watercolor drawings to my poetry, and I try really hard to get the two to sync together as a poem would. I'm thinking of art as another element of poetic form. So in other words, I'm not just like illustrating the text like you maybe seen, like maybe for the first thing in your mind would be sort of just like the graphic novel, even though the graphic novel is of course more intricate than just illustrating text. But at the same time, like poetry is not narrative, so the text and the image work differently than you would expect in a narrative. It's something I love doing and I love talking about. I just love talking about image and text coming together too. Like Claudia Rankine's a great example of a poet who always includes images in her work and does it really amazingly. And you would never think something like poetry comics would be that. But for me, poetry comics just represents an interest in poetry and the image coming together. And I've always found fun ways to show it at readings, on projection screens and whatnot. And now on the computer, it's pretty easy to share your screen. So it's almost like easier now to show poetry comics than in real life. I hope that kind of answers it.
If people would like to know more about poetry comics, are there practitioners that you would recommend who are working in this? I feel like one of the big graphic novelists over here in Seattle is David Lasky, who's made a lot of comics and graphic novelists, and he's done some work with, I feel like, an international poetry comics type journal, and didn't know if there were other resources that you might know of if people are interested in this genre.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of resources into the, people call it different things. Some people call it comics poetry or experimental comics or whatever, but although the term is sort of growing, there's a couple journals. Unfortunately, the one I used to help out at was Ink Brick. They still have a lot of stuff online, but they're not producing any more issues, but they were exclusively for poetry comics, but they do have a lot of resources on their website, Ink Brick. And, for me, people who actually don't fall under the term poetry comics, I find are really helpful would include Linda Berry, who's a really popular comics artist who has like 100% the mentality, I think, of poetry comics, a very organic, personal relationship with text and image. And I would also look into the New York School Painters and Poets era, where there was a lot of people working with text and image.
Like Joe Brainerd, I'm thinking, sort of came to mind. Yeah.
Yeah, Joe Brainerd is probably one of the biggest ones.
Thank you for sharing that knowledge with us. Appreciate it. Folks, have other questions for any of our other presenters? We have a diverse group tonight.
One question I had for everyone who read tonight is, could you tell us more about the books that you're working on, or the book that may be debuting in the near future? Could you just, tell us a little bit more about what the premise or what your vision behind the book is?
Sure. So I actually want to give a shout out. One of my students is here, and I wouldn't have written this book without her. She maybe doesn't know this, but one of my MFA students was writing a book about a building. There she is. So Haya is a journalist. She's an incredible writer, and when I knew her at USF, was working on a nonfiction project about a building known as Monkey Block. The proper name was Montgomery Block, and Haya's done incredible research, and she was entranced by this building that had been an artist colony. About 800 artists and writers and poets had lived in this building in San Francisco, and it blew me away. If you know anything about San Francisco, it's that artists have been displaced so brutally in the last 2 years. So I was infected a little bit with Haya's, enchantment with Montgomery Block and its history. And I started to look at, who had passed through there. So there had been, like I say, so many artists who had come through there. But I was really interested in the period about 1918, 20 or so, which is when the US was entering war and then exiting it. So I found out that Dorothea Lange had been part of the group. She'd never lived in Montgomery Block, but she'd been part of the group that lived there. And as these things go, you just kind of, you fall from one, kind of obsession into the next one. So it starts with the building and then it goes to Lang. And then I think what really kicked it off for me, what really ignited me and energized me, was finding out that Lang had had a Chinese American assistant when she was just new to the city. And she was given very little attention in any account of Dorothea Lange's life. And I just became so so fascinated by who this woman might have been. I myself am an immigrant. I think maybe it was an opportunity to imagine my way into Dorothea Lange's story, into that time. And I think also something else that happened is that the 1920s is, I think we all have the sense of, like, it was such a raucous time, and and it was fabulous, and for women the rights were so fresh and everything was happening, but there was also there were also really terrible things going on. So in California, there was a senator who ran on the campaign Keep California White, for example. And there was, it was a segregated city, and so that became more and more part of the story, and an education for me into the very, very troubling racist history of California, which I had not known. So that's that kind of, gives you a sense of the curious trajectory the book took. But I really, without Haya, I don't know what I would be doing. And I just, I'm so glad you're here. I can't tell you how lovely it is to see you. And I can't wait to share the book with you.
I can say a couple words about my recent project. So I do have a collection of flash prose out on submission that has pieces in it, much like the last piece I read here. I mean, it's pretty eclectic, but I would say maybe the common strand. The stories tend to explore the intersection of power and vulnerability via trauma, desire, and loss, I would say. So, that's more or less done. And then I was talking with Rita earlier today about my other project, which is very amorphous in a way in both content and form, but I intended it for it to be a novel in stories. We'll see if it stays that way. And it's basically, doesn't have a ton of plot. It's about a middle-aged woman who loses her husband to cancer. She's a mother of two. She has these sort of ambiguous paranormal experiences that she hopes mean that her husband is trying to make contact with her. And so just sort of explore her in these different situations. She's also sort of sleeping around with some people. Well, it's really about the madness of grief and middle age. That's sort of my way into that. So yeah, very slowly moving through that project. Maybe in a couple decades it will be out in the world. We'll see.
And Koon or Bianca? Koon? Yeah, you might just have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm not doing any poetry books as such, but we are at Goldfish Press. We work to publish a book of poems that exhibit human warmth and kindness and literary excellence. There'll be no entry fee. We don't have all the details yet, but for future information, go to goldfishbooks.com. It's all lowercase, goldfishbooks.com. So that's what we're going to do next, Goldfish Press. I actually had a book contract with a friend on the metaphor, but from MIT Press. I dropped out of it because it proved to be too technical. And he finished the book. His name is Key Holyoke. He's one of the very early investigators of how we think by analogy. So I think that's a very good book. So that was my master's thesis. So I hope to go back and do that kind of work a little bit later. Right now I'm finishing an MFA, University of New Orleans. But I have a background in math and in philosophy. So when you get back to that kind of work in poetry, I'm gonna have to put it on the back burner.
So Koon, at UNO, what is your thesis about? Are you compiling a collection of poems or a hybrid book like your Paper Sun book, which was both poems and
the metaphor book is some guy had a book out. He was trying to have computers generate metaphors. So we have a pretty good understanding how to do that linguistically and so forth. But the problem is that when it comes to the literary metaphor, we still kind of in the dark how that works. So that would be my investigation.
Thank you. Bianca, what are you working on?
My next book is a book of poetry that's coming out next fall with Tin House Books. As you could see from the poems I read tonight, it's a lot about the human condition, the human mental state up against nature much of the time. A lot about the perceived separateness of humanity from nature. A lot to do with our sort of conundrum of consciousness that causes so much suffering, but that also is so wonderful because it allows us to write poetry and make art. But yeah, and there's a lot of religion in the book too, because I feel like you can't really talk about that stuff without talking about the spiritual. I see them as completely intertwined. So yeah, it's maybe the book that makes me the most uneasy that it's coming out, but I think that's a good sign.
It looks like Nina has a question. Nina, would you like to unmute and ask it or put it in the chat? Is it in the chat?
Sorry, I popped off just for a second. I was just wondering, I've been how like maybe I was wondering how the pandemic has maybe affected your writing or changed maybe what you're writing about or your writing sort of priorities. I've been thinking about this a lot because I feel like not only am I different as a person, and that sounds so weird and dramatic, but like I feel like I'm very different as a person than I was before this. But I also feel like I'm a very different writer, or like my priorities are. And I was just sort of wondering how that has happened, if that has happened for you, or the ways that that has transpired.
I mean, yeah, it's like, I don't know what's going on, but like major changes have happened in me, like emotionally and like as a writer. And I read a poem tonight that was written during quarantine. And I think I think this is a time of massive introspection, and it's like excruciating. Um, but I really think that, it's not a good or bad thing, but it's really an opportunity to um, take stock of what your priorities are in your writing. And also you just face so many things about yourself and your relationships, your closest relationships. So it's painful for me, but also like there's no other reality. This is it. So it's like it just is, and we've got to like somehow interact with it creatively, or we're just fucked. Like I don't think I can't do this without somehow, and it's been really hard. Like I go weeks without being able to do anything, and it's like completely normal. But like, but I think ultimately, like we have to react to it. Otherwise, it's like, even though you're like, poetry is meaningless in this situation, but it's not. It's like, it's really not. I'll stop.
It's really hard. I mean, I think we're probably, as writers, we're already introspective and pretty solitary. And I think you might think that it would be easier for us because we're introspective and solitary, but I think it's harder. I think because we don't have as many, we don't have as many systems in place, or my husband seems to be weathering it a lot better than I am, because my interactions were really just with my students and a few writer friends, and now I don't have that, and I've felt a terrible sense of loss and grief around that. And I just have to say, I've always struggled with depression, and it's been so bad for periods of time where I haven't been able to write. And I guess this is the first time I've actually said that. But I think that, it really can exacerbate mental health issues, and it has for me for sure. Um, I don't have any kind of solution for myself, except that I know I'm not well if I'm not writing. So, it's sort of like I have to find a way back, because that just exacerbates my depression so much. And so I've been getting into a routine again. And for the first time in my life, I've said 1,000 words a day. I've never written like that. I've always just kind of said, oh, I'm gonna sit down in the mornings. But I had to really put a metric on it for the first time and say, sit down 1,000 words. Absolutely, I'm incredibly gentle with myself for maybe the first time in my life, where I don't even look at what I've written. I just write. I just try to keep going forward, and that's it. It has helped. So wish me luck. I hope I keep doing that. But I know myself, and I know if I'm not writing, I'm so much worse.
I say the pandemic is a thing. It's a disease like any other, but I think how we are polarized by it is the sad thing. It's a very dangerous thing that we're polarized by it. I think much the population is living alternative universe. The anti-scientific, anti-factual, they're delusional, and we have a delusional leader. Luckily he's gone out, but that fosters and generates and make use of this for his own gain. He would delay the transition, and then delay, he's killed thousands of people. So I don't think the pandemic itself is the problem. but how we are, how we're led by people who are misusing this to kind of in a way to enslave us. So we as writers, we have to be more critical of what's actually factual out there. We can chase words all day, but we're not going to get to a reality unless we're going to stop using words and dig with our hands into a dirt. That's reality. Yeah, okay.
And I just had a follow-up question from that, and we can wrap up soon. But my follow-up question is, when I find myself writing, I need to kind of create a soft space, for myself. Like, I guess a space to make a lot of mistakes, because I go through so many drafts with my writing, and I know that oftentimes the first time I'm creating a metaphor on the page or an idea, it's not super clear to me as an author. So I guess what I wanted to ask you is, like, how do you create that space of exploration or curiosity, or even like safety for yourself as an author, like with, the news being so extreme, or the pandemic, and knowing people might be getting sick, even people that like loved ones and so on. Like, how do you create almost like a psychic shield, or like like a tent or someplace where you can explore and be creative?
I'll say I do not have any brilliant answer to that, but I've found that working with the body can be really helpful. And sometimes for me, even before the pandemic, when I need to really relax into my writing, I will just write in bed. I'll write in bed, I'll pull up the blankets, and I almost sort of convince myself that I'm not writing. Like it's just sort of this offhanded process, feels very low stakes. And I find that really helps me when the pressure is on, or, I will go to different places depending on my state of mind. Sometimes I need to be more alert because I'm feeling groggy. So then I'll go to kind of an upright, hard chair. So I think the soft place for me, or the safe place for me, depends on me having an awareness of what I need in various moments, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know how great my psychic shield is all the time. It's I think everyone's asking this question right now, and I, only recently have figured out a way to get back into a space where I can feel creative and hopeful about my creative life and future. And I've had to take more care of myself than I ever have in my entire life. Like, I think it's really hard to like let certain things go. But it's like I've got to just do everything I can to stay in a state of like, I just don't want to be in a state of like terror and suffering, like internally. It's like, if I can get out of that state, like it's okay. But I've realized that I have to be really careful about things like drinking or like eating too much. And like I've reined it in. I'm like eating an Ayurvedic like mung bean diet right now, and it's like doing something. I'm like, oh, I need to be like insanely serious about this like thing, like what's going in my body. I can't work out or anything right now, like forget that. But I don't need to, like, I need to take it really easy. And certain things give you anxiety, but it's like if it's not all day, I'm happy. Like I just you take it day by day. It's like every day is so different emotionally. And I'm like, and I've been journaling a lot, like not, journaling like my thoughts and experience, like an actual journal, not just like poem writing. And it's really helpful to like be really sharp and aware of like your triggers and whatnot. So everything is turning into a therapy session lately. I love it.
Yeah, I think you need like therapy.
Like,
and
let's just throw therapy in there as like a tool that you could use, like they're frontline workers, therapists right now. So utilize them.
Others.
So I would like to return to the subject of my website because so I don't think you were here, but I got a compliment about my website and I made it myself. So I'm just like as proud of that as any book I've written. But the reason I bring it up is that it was actually so good for me to do something that wasn't writing. So do something creative, right? But I'm not, doesn't really, the stakes are pretty low, right? I mean, it's just a website after all. It was something beyond what I thought I could do. And it kind of gave me some confidence about myself. So, I mean, any kind of pursuit that might feel creative, but not necessarily within your genre could be maybe helpful, restorative. And I just, I guess want to pass that along, if you paint or, I don't know if you've ever had a curiosity about music or whatnot. To me, that's been really helpful to kind of explore my visual side, my long neglected visual side.
Yeah, what I've been doing to kind of take care of my own mental health is I knit. So like I make sweaters, and this is literally in between like very stressful meetings at work. I'll make this like just for like 2 minutes. And but it's been my place of sanity, like doing something that's not related to Zoom or the computer or writing. It's just a place where I can concentrate on something that my hands are making, and just enjoy it. So nice. Cool. So other questions or other things that people want to talk about? Oh, mandolin, beautiful. Yes. You can commission a sweater, Bianca, if you like.
Maybe I'll just really good. Yeah.
Maybe I'll just say something about Koon's visit to my class today, and then if people want to kind of respond, they can. It's a question that overlaps a little bit with some of the most recent questions that were asked. But so in my publishing and fieldwork class, the class that helps me produce Hunger Mountain, our literary magazine, Koon joined us today, and I read the very conventional bios that are available, and then said, okay, which of these seems most accurate to you? And like, what else do you want us to know about you? And I won't say what you shared, Koon, because that's your story. But you shared some of your struggles, but also some of your studies. So some of the things you've gone through as a human and some of the things you've focused on learning about. And we sort of asked in different ways how those things worked their way into your poetry. And then listening to you read tonight, they don't explicitly, right? They're at a slant. Like all the things that you talk to us about that's never the center of the poem. It might be kind of a tangential part of the poem. And then this is making me think about our other readers. So nobody read nonfiction, right? But there's ways in which we could possibly understand that what you were talking about has maybe something to do with you, right? So Bianca, I'm particularly thinking about your poem that just slayed me about being like a sick mom and having a 3-year-old kid. And like, I'm not going to assume that's you, but like, I happen to know you have a kid, right? And like, whether that's you or not, it speaks a lot to me. I have a 4-year-old kid and I have been a sick mom. And then Jenny, the first piece you read talking about like, I am a depressed person. I have been a depressed person. The first person does not make me think that's you speaking, but it does make me wonder where is that coming from? How do you relate to that? And then really separately, Jasmin, you're writing about this real person who's like distinctly and explicitly not you. So I've just been thinking about the ways in which I use my fiction to work out stuff inside of me, more so even than in my nonfiction. And so some of my students have heard me say this, like, I am much more vulnerable in my fiction than in my nonfiction. Because in my nonfiction, it's me. And so I'm a little bit more guarded. In my fiction, I can pretend it's not me. And that's where I'm very taking risks on the page. It's actually my stuff. So if people don't want to talk about that, because again, this is a weird time and we're all just like trying to survive it, what I want to say is like, thank you for the risks you put on the page, even if it's not you, of just like thinking about what it is to be a human and how hard it is, even not in a pandemic, how hard it is to be a lover and a parent and a friend and a intellectual and an artist and a visual artist, a photographer, a traveler, someone who tries to change their life and do good things with it. Like all of that just meant so much to me. So even if you don't want to say what that's like for you, thank you. And then if you want to say a bit about how you're working on your own ideas about the world through these genres that aren't fiction, that aren't nonfiction, that aren't inherently factual, I'm happy to hear it. But if we're not wanting to talk about ourselves anymore, that's okay. But just, I'm grateful. The last thing I'll say is that Koon in class was talking a lot about how writing has been self-therapy for you, and that if you're going to be a writer and if you're going to be a publisher, do it and try to help other people. And we didn't explicitly talk in class about how that might be, but we're working on a journal with the theme of art saves. Like everyone in the room believes that art matters and art helps people. And so even now I believe that. And so like, thank you for your work tonight. It made me remember kind of what I care about in the world. And then I'll stop if anyone wants to say anything about that.
Well, I used to live in a halfway house in San Francisco. After I was released from the mental hospital, there were dropouts from, famous schools, Yale, Columbia, Berkeley, and I was there just a peon from China, basically a peasant boy, and yet I had the most money living there because I worked. Bad jobs like papers, tutoring, working all night in a donut shop, things like that. And I got some of the stories living in a halfway house and being in San Francisco at that time. Now, what do I want to say about that? I forget what I want to say about that. So that's my problem. I'm 71 years old. There are a lot of stories in my life, but I don't remember most of them. And when I try to say anything about them, I've skipped 2 generations. People today, they need information quick. They need to change it quick. So if you talk to them for more than 5 minutes, they say, well, you're wasting my time, old man. But if you get a philosophy book and try to study metaphysics, they've been there for 2,000 years and they haven't given up. They still try to understand the universe. And so that's essentially why I am. I'm 71, but maybe for the next 10 years, I could work a little bit longer. What I've been studying all these years. I know what I was going to say about halfway house now. We had a black janitor. He was not an employee of the halfway house. He was a contractor. Every day to clean the place. Every day he saw me when I came back from the donut shop with a bag of donuts for everybody. He said, everybody got to eat. That's the thing he ever said to me. Everybody got to eat. Well, my family were in the food business, China, growing food. And we came to this country, we operated a restaurant. And that was the ambition my parents had for me to operate a restaurant and maybe have a chain of them in the Midwest. In fact, Chinese food in the Midwest, with the Chinese food there isn't very good. So, there's a lot of money to be made, even in the catering business or any kind of fundamental business like housing, food, fabrics. That's what the immigrants, they seize on because everybody needs those. And those are relatively simple things to do. They're not understanding language, go to Harvard or whatever, but they can make money and they can sponsor the kids over here. So eventually they have numbers of people. That means eventually they can pull the money together, pull the resources together. So they're rising minority, just like the Asians now, a swing vote bloc. They can decide important elections by being a swing vote. So now they're paying attention to the Asians for the first time. We have earned a right to vote. My grandfather died in this country. I don't know where. Nobody knows where or how he died. So that's the legacy I'm left with. So anyway, thank you.
And any final comments? If, Jasmine, Bianca, Jenny, if you want to respond to Erin's question.
I could say a few things. This is the paradox or conundrum, curse of writing, is that in the end, it's always you, So I started out writing, my first book was a memoir, and I was terrified that I'd never have another book to write. I thought that that was the only story I had to tell. And it kind of wasn't even entirely mine, because I didn't make the story up. I kind of was handed that story. So I can say for me, it's been wonderful to discover that I could enter a story of my own creation. And even though I'm, still shackled to myself, and I see all of my demons on the walls, as I'm moving through the 1920s. I mean, of course, necessarily what I'm seeing when I'm looking back at the 20s is absolutely a lot to do with who I am and where I've been. And that's, I guess, something that I have come to increasingly just acknowledge, is that I can't really get away from myself, but I can still have fun, where I can explore other things, other places. And then maybe especially as an immigrant, this is my first book that's not about Iran. My first two books were about Iran. And for a long time, I thought I could only write about Iran. And so it was a really big deal to write a book that wasn't about Iran, and, to feel like my imagination could fasten onto America, and I would be capable of telling a story, even as colored as it is by my experience. That was a huge leap for me, that I might make that move from not only memoir into fiction, but from one cultural experience into another. So just some random thoughts, but wherever you go, there you are. There you are,
Well, I'd like to say something about Goldfish Press. I used to publish the magazine first, Chrysanthemum, which you were in the 2004. And the first person, Bami Choi was first published in Chrysanthemum in about the year 2000. I don't know if you heard that she's won the National Book Award in Poetry. So I was the first one to publish her.
Very cool. I thought I saw Nina have a question. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I don't know if we're going like super far over, but this is probably, I guess, a bit of a turn away, but I was wondering what books you are reading during the pandemic, whether or not they're influencing your writing, because I found also that during the pandemic, my radar for books that I'm choosing to read has changed, and I was sort of just wondering what books you've been reading, what books you recommend during this time.
I just read a really good fiction book, which I don't read as much fiction as I do poetry and nonfiction, but I read this book called The Sea by Iris Murdoch, and it was like one of the best books I've ever read. And it's like he's like so isolated and obsessive in the book. It's like perfect for a pandemic read. And I'm reading a lot of poetry. I'm reading Major Jackson's new book, The Absurd Man, and this poetry book by this woman named Kathleen Graeber called The Eternal City. It's really good. I'd recommend that. And I'm also reading some philosophy, which is fun. Getting that I am an existentialist. I was like reading it. I was like, Jesus, this is like exactly like my new book. It's so embarrassing. It's already been done before. It's already been done.
Yeah, I'll say I typically read cross genres, but and I'm still doing some of that, but I have found it hard to read during the pandemic. And ironically, the thing I find easiest to read is like a really big immersive novel, because it just feels you can just totally enter this completely different reality. So I've really enjoyed novels. Right now I'm reading a wonderful kind of literary thriller called The Past Is Never by Tiffany Quay Tyson. She's a colleague of mine at Lighthouse Writers Workshop. Great book, very suspenseful and also beautifully written, kind of Southern Gothic. And then, I read Luster by Raven Lulani. Oh, Sigrid Nunez. I don't know if she says it Nunez or Nunez. I don't think she has a little squiggle over her end, but love her writing The Friend. Her latest one is something like What Are You Going Through? Anything by her. I've just been, consuming, devouring her books. And then I did read a collection of prose poetry called The Fire Eater by Jose Hernandez Diaz. And it's kind of whimsical and joyful with, shot through with some pathos, but I found it very freeing to read. I feel there's a real just kind of levity in his writing that helped me bring some of that into mine.
Oh, so
I have a joke. So now some of us cannot do what we normally do because of the pandemic. But the joke I heard is a physics joke. It says this is based on second law thermodynamics, which means if you transfer energy from any system to another system, you can lose energy in the terms of heat. So that's the second law thermodynamics. So the people say, you're in this game, whether you like it or not. You cannot win and you cannot quit. So that's everything we do. We cannot win, we cannot quit. So I think.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. And Jasmine, I know you wanted to jump in.
That was so beautiful. That would have been a great ending. So I'm about to ruin it. But I have so little patience. I start book after book after book, and I just have, I think part of it is a concentration of focus issue, but I think it's also, I just have such low tolerance if something is not well written, or I just have there's no generosity in me anymore. It's just been like sucked out, and I'm just and so what I've been reading
I
a lot
feel that way too. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's terrible. And it's terrible for me as a novelist because it's so important for me to be reading fiction when I'm writing. It's like, that's my lifeblood. It's like my infusion. I have to be reading fiction all the time when I'm writing, and I haven't been able to get into books. But I've read book after amazing book of nonfiction. I've read so much excellent nonfiction nowadays, and a few that I'd recommend if you haven't read them. But there's a wonderful book called Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments. I think I might be botching it a little bit, but it's a book it's a nonfiction book, but it's a hybrid of fiction and nonfiction about young women, young African-American women in the 1920s. And she is an extraordinary scholar, but she's bringing all that knowledge to bear through storytelling. So that's amazing. And then I read Minor Feelings by Kathy Park Hong, which was just incredible. But somehow nonfiction disappoints me less often. It just does.
I feel the same way, in fact.
I need to write down some of these titles because I would love, and I feel almost like if I could get one book, like really just let it get under my skin again, I might break this terrible spell, that has befallen me. So I might go to James Baldwin or some of these other recommendations, because I miss it, and I would love to sink into a novel again and feel just that pleasure of dissolving into the story.
Yeah, I think the last time I read a novel, I mean, we just read half of A Yellow Sun. Oh, The City We Became. Haven't read that yet. That's really good, right, Erin? Yeah, you loved it. Awesome. Yeah, cool. Cool, cool, cool. I will have to check that out. Oh, the fifth season, N.K. Jemisin. Nice. Haya, yeah. And I know we're going to be wrapping up in just a moment, but Haya, tell us a little bit more about this project that you were doing with is it Montgomery Row, or I'm not sure if I'm capturing it right, but
Oh, well, first of all, thanks to everybody for the amazing reading. Felt very sustaining to hear them. Right, so I'll just say that this author just won a MacArthur grant, and that book is the first book in a trilogy. I'll also say that my therapist told me that when you are in crisis and afraid and triggered, you can't read or concentrate because your body doesn't want to let you in order to protect you. So I've heard several people say that people are practicing being gentle with yourself, so keep doing that. And the Montgomery Block was the building that stood where the Transamerica Pyramid is now. It was built in 1853. And it became a hub for many things that I believe define San Francisco, or did until recently. It was a center for queer community at a very early time. It sits, of course, very, very close to Chinatown. And its caretaker for 60 years was an immigration lawyer who wrote extensively in favor of more just treatment for immigrants, particularly Chinese immigrants. And yeah, I could go on. And it's fabulous that Jasmin wrote a book first.
well, are you working also on a manuscript about that Montgomery Block as well?
Yeah, that was when I was doing an MFA at USF. When Jasmin was my professor, that was my thesis dissertation. Yeah, that was my thing, but I'm now completely blocked. So we'll see. I'm working.
But Haya has a few beautiful, that's a great book.
Bullshit research.
Title. Yeah, but Haya has a few nonfiction. She's got I wish I could link it real quick. I'm not like super great with that, but she has published pieces that recover the history of that place. And so really grateful for her introduction. And she's also, like I said, like a spectacular journalist and has written a lot about the city. So, so it was just wonderful to work with you. And my gosh, how great to see you here today. The students are always the best. I think the connection between professor and student, I don't feel closer. I don't know. I mean, my students are so special and my professors are so special. It's like my real tribe. It's my real family. So I'm like first in line for you when the time comes, Haya. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. This has been such a lovely evening. I've really enjoyed and rejoiced in everything that I've heard. And thank you for being so open and honest. And I feel less alone in many ways, just hearing what everyone has said tonight. I just wanted to give a couple final reminders as we wrap up. First is please come and celebrate our students on December 16th. For the folks who are in our department, our graduation will be from 5 to 6 o'clock. for everyone who's graduating in our certificate in publishing program and our December grads. And then from 6 to 8 is our public reading. So everyone on this call is welcome. Please check it out. The details about how to register for that are on vcfa.edu on the front page. So you can please come to those readings that will happen. All of our students will be featured on December 16th. And other things that are happening, because we have so many wonderful visiting writers in our program. On December 10th from 3:30 to 4:30, Sean Wong from Seattle will be doing a meet and greet with our students. If you're interested, drop us a line. On Friday, December 11th, Jasmine will be doing a lunch hour discussion with our students and faculty. That will be from 12 to 1 o'clock. Please stop by for that. And then on December 18th from 12 to 1 o'clock, Koon Woon will be also doing a meet and greet with our students in Erin's publishing fieldwork class. So stop by for that. Bianca Stone and Jasmine and Jenny and others are also, and Sean Wong as well, who's not on this call, are doing professional development talks either at 9:30 to 11:30 in the morning Eastern time in our program, or from 6 to 8 throughout this month. So if you're a student, if you're a faculty member, please do come to those talks. It's on our Google Calendar, follow the Zoom link, and they're open to everyone in our community. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who came tonight. Thank you so much, Jasmine and Jenny, Bianca and Koon. Thank you, Hassan and Shinyi, for doing these beautiful introductions. And thank you everyone else who came for your wonderful questions and your support. So if everyone could just unmute for a moment, we'll just do another round of applause. Hey, thank you.